Good morning, friends. Good morning. So last Sunday we acknowledged that getting through to people can be hard work. We acknowledged that there are people in each of our lives with whom communication feels very much like banging your head off a brick wall. We're trying to get through to our wife, to our husband, to our child, to our customer, to our employer. And no matter how hard we say it, no matter how often we say it, no matter how many different ways we think of saying it, they seem simply incapable of hearing it. For those of you who weren't here last Sunday, I explained that part of the reason for this has to do with what we now know about the construction of the human brain. So last Sunday I taught you that in the 1960s, scientists started to speak about the brain as consisting of three connected but slightly separate levels. So inside each of us there's what's called the reptilian brain, then there's the mammal or the limbic system, and then at the top there's the primate brain or the prefrontal cortex. So, just to recap, at the very bottom, the oldest and lowest part of the brain, the reptilian brain, is our basic brain. This is the part of the brain that helps you stay alive. This is the part of the brain that tells you the simple stuff like remember to breathe, remember to eat, remember to stay cool on a hot day. This is survival brain 101. So, if you're out in the woods for a walk and you encounter an angry bear, this is the bit of your brain that will kick into action and hopefully keep you alive, provided you've worked on your cardio over the years. Then a little bit higher up, there's the middle part of the brain, the mammal brain, also called the limbic system. And this is where all the fun stuff happens. So this is the part of the brain where you experience pleasure and fear and basic primal emotions. All the things that make us feel us. This is the bit of the brain where many of those things happen. And then at the very top of the brain, there's the primate brain, or also called the prefrontal cortex. This is your clever brain. This is the bit of the brain where rational thought happens, where math happens, where language happens, where deductive reasoning happens, where figuring out problems happen. If you're going to think your way to a better life, this is the bit of the brain that will help you to do that. And by the way, life is often a battle between these different parts of the brain. For example, when it's tax season, the top part of your brain wants to fill in the forms. It wants to crunch the numbers. It wants to get things filed on time, accurately. But the lower bit of your brain, your mammal brain, your limbic system, it wants to watch reruns of House of Cards. And success, therefore, is often a matter of slapping down your lower bits of your brain in favour of your higher brain. Anyway, then we learned that deep in the brain, somewhere beside our low reptile brain and our slightly higher limbic system, is a thing called the amygdala. A little almond-shaped piece of tissue that controls a lot of our primal survival emotions. So when you, for example, are walking in the woods and you see an angry bear, or you think there's an angry bear, this bit of your brain takes over. And that matters, because when that happens, you immediately suffer what scientists now call an amygdala hijack. This is when this bit of your brain, accurately or inaccurately, perceives a threat so severe that it switches off. That's important. It switches off the bits of your brain that are able to think cleverly. The bits of your brain that have to do with rational thought and rational conversation. All of that clever you is switched off, so that primal survival 101 you can take over. Let me just emphasize that. When this happens, the part of your brain that is capable of rational thought and conversation is turned off, and the lower survival, primal, emotional bit of you takes over. Before we move on, can you recognize that phenomena in your dealings with people in your life? Can you remember a time when you were trying to get through to your husband, but he was so stressed about something, he was so angry about something, that there was simply no talking to him? Remember that happening? Can you remember a time when you were trying to get through your wife? You were trying to have a conversation with her about something, but she was in one of those moods. She was angry about something. She was upset about something, and when she was in that angry, upset state, there was simply no point in you trying to inject some sane, rational conversation. It was a waste of time. It was like you were talking to another person. Do you remember when your teenager went through their first heartbreak and they were crying and they were emotional and they were upset? It didn't help, did it, when you said, "There's plenty more fish in the sea"? There are plenty more fish in the sea. That's a perfectly sane, rational thing to say. There's loads of fish in the sea. A lot of whales too, but there's loads of fish. And a bunch of sharks. But loads of fish. Perfectly sane thing to say. But it didn't help, because the lower, deeper, emotional part of them had taken over and you were wasting your time. When this happens, there's no point talking. And it's not you, it's just science. Over the years, rightly and wrongly, real or imagined, that person's amygdala, the bit of their brain that perceives threats and hurts and fears, puts up barriers. And their brain becomes hijacked by these things. They have erected mental barriers in their brain that makes it hard to get through to them. And the challenge is, the problem is, the harder you try to get through to them, the more you try to be rational and to tell them and to tell them and to tell them, the harder these barriers become. And the more difficult communication gets. Today in church, we're going to begin talking about how you can find a way around those barriers and finally get through to that person. And we begin with Christianity. Remember, getting through to people isn't luck. It's an art, it's a science, and it's a theology. This morning we're going to take our theology from the letter of St. Paul to the church in Philippi, which begins with 4 conditional statements, each of which begin with the word if. So Paul says, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ. In other words, friends, I want you to think back and I want you to answer this question. At any point in your life, has your Christian faith helped you ever? Has there ever been a time in your life where your Christian faith has made you stronger than your circumstances would otherwise have allowed? Is that true? Then he says, if you have any comfort from his love. In other words, during the dark chapters of your story, and there surely has been some, has your belief in a good God who loves you ever been a comforting thought? Even in a basic sense. When everything around you was falling apart, when nothing was working out, when you were hurt, when you were rejected, when your best was met by life's worst. At that time was the basic idea, Jesus loves me, this I know for the Bible tells me so. Did that mean something to you? Did it give you a shred of comfort? Then he says, if you have any fellowship with the Holy Spirit. The word fellowship in the New Testament means more than getting together with someone for coffee. It is the quintessential Christian church word. It describes how we from a diverse and different set of circumstances and backgrounds and experiences have been grabbed, as it were, by the Holy Spirit and brought to a common belief that the life and the death and the resurrection of Christ was somehow for us. Paul is saying, is that true for you? Did God work on your life and bring you to this common belief that Christianity is yours? Then he says, if any tenderness, if any compassion, so speaking still about God and using very emotionally charged words, the word tenderness that he uses, for example, is one that would have been used by a first century gastroenterologist. It's a word that literally means the deep, deep intestines of a person. Paul is saying to the church, going through the things they're going through, do you get a sense, even a small one, that somehow, somewhere, this God in whom you believe feels for you? Deep in his gut. Do you get a sense that this God isn't just a God who gives you lists of stuff to do and not do, but he actually feels your life and what you're going through and what you're experiencing? If you know that, if you know something of his mercy, if that resonates with you in any way, then, he says, make my joy complete by being like-minded. So this is interesting now, because the word joy is somewhat discordant. At least it is when I tell you that Paul is writing these words in prison. So notice the subtlety of this word then. His personal circumstances are not happy. Let's get that right, yeah? Let's just lay that on the table. His personal circumstances are not happy. But he is happy nonetheless. Let me step out of the text for a moment and ask you, is that possible? I don't mean theoretically, I don't mean generally, I mean for you. For you, is that possible? I know there's a lot going on in your life that's not right. I get that. I know there's a lot going on in your life that absolutely was not plan A, that things aren't how you imagined they'd be. But in your life, right here, right now, today, not the life that you hoped for, but the life that you actually ended up with and got. In your life today, is happiness possible? Even just a little? Surely. Back to the text. Now, when the Bible, notice what he says, make my joy complete by being like-minded. When the Bible talks to the church about them being like-minded, it does not mean that they should all agree on everything. The fact is that different church groups felt just as differently about different things as different church groups do in the 21st century. That is an inevitable and, I think, a rather enjoyable part of life. So notice, please, then, that Paul does not apply this phrase, like-mindedness. This is what he's looking for. Like-mindedness. He doesn't apply that to everything in life. Rather, he applies it specifically and exclusively to how we feel about one another. So look at how it flows. He says, I want you to be like-minded. How? By having the same love. Same love as who? It's in the Bible. Who do you think he's talking about? Jesus. And what was the nature of Jesus' love in the Bible? It was that he gave himself continually and constantly for others. This is one of the most foundational truths in the New Testament. Jesus believed that his life wasn't to be lived for himself, but was to be lived for others. Remember the big sentences in the New Testament. Greater love has no man than this, that he laid down his life for others. Love others, love others, love others as I have loved you. This is the big idea in the New Testament given to the church. Love other people. There is to be no debate for Paul on this issue, no discussion on this issue. We are to be for other people, not just for ourselves. So then, selfishness is the antithesis of Christian practice. And that matters. Because in our well-intentioned efforts to get through to that person, to reach those persons, selfishness is in fact our default position. We are in communication inherently and essentially selfish. And fair enough. When you're trying to get through to your husband, when you're trying to get through to your wife, to your teenager, to your customer, to your employer, what you're trying to get through is your agenda. That's always what happens in all communications. That's just natural. But if you can find a way of mirroring, of reflecting, of touching what they need, what they feel, what their agenda may be, you will begin to find a way around the barriers that they have put up between you and them. Your problem in your communication is that you're talking, but they're not listening. And every single person with whom you speak, they're screaming to be understood, screaming to be felt. What I'm about to tell you happened. Frank finds himself standing on the corner of a large building in a shopping mall. Initially, he's holding a shotgun to his own neck. The SWAT team are called in, obviously, as are a pair of crisis negotiators. While the SWAT team take their positions, they begin to fill in the background details. They're looking at a man in his late 30s who lost his customer service job 6 months earlier. And in that 6 months, he's interviewed for many other jobs but hasn't managed to land one. A month earlier, his wife and kids moved out to live with her parents. She told him that she needed a break and that he needed to get his act together. The landlord of their apartment kicked him out because he'd fallen behind on his rent. He moved into a shabby basement apartment in a bad part of the city, stopped shaving, let himself go. The last straw for Frank was the restraining order he'd gotten the day before. He now wasn't allowed to see his own kids. He lost everything. A man, literally and metaphorically now, on the edge. The lead negotiator, a Lieutenant Evans, starts talking to Frank. Calmly, of course. He says, "Frank, this is Lieutenant Evans. I'm going to be talking with you because there's a way out of this that I need to tell you about. I know you don't think you have any choice, but you do have a choice." Frank responds angrily, "You don't know anything about me, man. Get out of here, just leave me alone." Lieutenant Evans replies, "I can't do that. So here's what I need you to do. I need you to calm down. Get lost, man. You don't know me." "Sir, I need you to put down the gun and calm down so we can begin talking. The conversation goes on like this for what feels like an hour, with Lieutenant Evans telling Frank what he needs and Frank telling him to get lost. It's clear in all of this that Frank isn't evil. He's just disturbed. He's angry. Then another detective turns up and takes over. He says something unusual to Frank. He says, Frank, I bet you feel that nobody knows what it's like to have tried everything and be stuck with this as your final option. Isn't that true? Yeah, you're right. No one cares. And I'll bet you feel that nobody knows what it's like to start every day believing that there's more chance something will go wrong than go right. Isn't that true as well? Yeah, man. No one knows what it's like. Now he said yes twice. And because no one knows how bad it is, and because no one cares, that's why you're here wanting to end it all, isn't it? Yeah, man. Now he's got 3 yeses. At this point, Frank was toning his voice down, showing signs of calming down, even though he hadn't been asked to calm down by this particular detective. Then the detective says, tell me more. What happened to you? Then Frank puts the gun down and sits down and recounts his story beginning from when he lost his job. Frank lived that day. In a few sentences, he went from refusing to listen to having a conversation. Why? The shift was no accident. The first negotiator communicated quite rightly what he needed to happen. Communicated quite rightly what his agenda was for this very dangerous situation. But the second detective found a way of mirroring the things that Frank was feeling. And when that happened, Frank started to say yes. He said yes once, he said yes twice, he said yes a third time. And once you've got 3 yeses, a fourth's not all that difficult, is it? Then you're on a yes roll. And what you want in your communication is to get someone on a yes roll, where they start to roll with the things you're looking for. And to do that, you need to make the other person feel felt. The explanation for this is in the mirror neurons that we spoke about last Sunday. When you begin to mirror the things another person feels, they're wired biologically to mirror you in return. And the latest research suggests that we are constantly mirroring the world, trying to win its love and approval, trying to make it, trying to fit in. And each time we do this, we create a reciprocal hunger to be mirrored back, to be fitted in back. And in today's world, with the life we all live, this gap is an aching hunger. Like I said last week, everyone has this life. Every day we give out our best. And our best is met with apathy, with rejection, and more often than not with zero response at all. And when you just tell another person what your agenda is, when you just tell another person what you need, you're just adding more pressure to their already pressured life. You're just another voice among the thousands of voices that don't care about them, that don't listen, that don't even try to understand what they feel and what they're going through. But when you start to talk about what they need and what they feel, a connection is made. It's biology. And once you make a connection, you can start to get through. The Bible goes on to say, do nothing out of selfish ambition. If all you care about in your communication with me is what you need, why would I listen to what you have to say? The person you're trying to get through to, they're just like you. They live a life just like you. And just like you, they're trying their best. and their best is continually met with almost no response from the world, and they are dying to feel felt. They are dying to feel that someone understands, that someone gets them, that someone sees them. And if you bypass all of their inner hungers and needs, why would they listen to you? Why? Look at what he says next. He says, do nothing out of vain conceit. A person who was vainly conceited in the ancient world was a person who very confidently and very assertively spoke nonsense that nobody listened to. If you're talking to them, but not listening to them, are you really talking? Like if you're talking, but your talk has the net result that they're not listening, you may as well be talking to a brick wall. And it's not just their fault, it's your fault as well. You're being selfish. You're just caring about your agenda. So why would they respond to you? So Paul is saying then, and it is such a basic Christian idea, it is so foundational to the New Testament. Stop being so utterly fascinated by yourself and absorbed with yourself and pushing your views and what you need and your opinions onto them. But instead, he says, in humility, consider others better than yourselves. Each of you, it's right there in the New Testament, each of you should consider not only your own interests, but also the interests of others. The word humility in the New Testament doesn't mean having a negative opinion of yourself or of your abilities. It's got nothing to do with that. The word humility in the New Testament means going through life for others. For others. Pause, if you will, to ask yourself, is that so bad? Put yourself in their shoes. How would you like to be in a relationship with someone who was all about you? That'd be all right. How would you like to have a parent like that? A parent who wasn't obsessed with their agenda, but consumed with yours. That'd be all right. How would you like to be in a business relationship with someone, to do deals with someone who wasn't selfish, but was interested in you and how you could be better and how your thing could work better? Wouldn't you want to do business with that person? Wouldn't you want to work with that person? Wouldn't you want to be in a relationship with that person? This is difficult, of course. I'll talk more about it next Sunday, but let me suggest 5 things you could try, not in a template kind of a way, but just try. 5 steps towards maybe getting your first yes. First of all, try to attach an emotion to what you think the other person might be feeling. Guess. Try something like this. Hey, I'm trying to get a sense of what you're feeling right now, and I think it's fill in the blank. I think you're angry. I think it's fear. I think you're suspicious. I think it's insecurity. Whatever. Is that right? I'm trying to get a sense of what you're feeling. I think it's this. Is that right? If it is right, you've got a yes. If it's not right, you've got the beginnings of a conversation. Then perhaps say, so how frustrated are you? Then get ready for a torrent of emotions. How frustrated are you right now by this? Then perhaps say, and the reason you're so fill in the gap, angry, afraid, whatever, is because... And let them talk. then, now, if that works for you, look what's happened. You've gone from 0 getting through to a yes, to information, to them communicating with you what they feel. This is good, this matters. Then perhaps say, and what needs to happen for that to feel better? What needs to happen for this to work? What needs to happen for this to go through? What needs? Tell me from your perspective what needs to happen. Then say, what role can I play in making that happen? And if that works out for you, you've got a whole bunch of yeses and a whole bunch of things going in your direction. And it's Christian. It's not a trick. It's just, it's science and it's Christianity. It's the way the brain works and it's the way the Bible wants us to be. Be about them. Figure out what they're feeling and what they want and respond to it. What's wrong with that? You know, and I'm sorry, but you are a Christian. You're supposed to care about what they need. You're not supposed to be selfish. Think about it. Who has had the most influence on your life? Who's really mattered? Was it the people who led the most interesting lives? Or was it the people who were most interested in you? Remember that person who took an interest in your life? Who took time to speak into your life, to feel you out, to feel your agenda and to lead you, to actually show an interest in your life. That person made a difference, didn't they? You want to make a difference too. And you make it, not by pushing your agenda on them, but by finding out what theirs is, showing an interest. More on that next Sunday. God bless you. Thank you for coming. See you next week.